What is going on, everyone, and welcome to my Magicka Sorcerer build diary, I guess you can call it. So a lot of you guys have been asking me to do my Magicka build again for Clockwork City, and a lot of it is the same. A few things have been changed, obviously. That's why I'm making this video. Mostly the staves, the traits, and champion points. But the build itself, it kind of looks like something I would have used a few patches ago, and I think that was like 2 patches ago when it was good, but there are a few things that have changed. Obviously CP has been raised, and yeah, it's a diary more or less, and I'll show you what I use. Think of it as a build, but I'll list some replacements in case you don't have various items, and yeah, I'll just tell you how everything's going, and then after that we will go over pretty much everything else. And in the near future, not in this video, but in the upcoming stuff, I'll be doing some gameplay showing you how this works in actual trial situations. So yeah, you guys can see. And as you may know, my Magicka Sorcerer was one of my favorites before I made another Stam DK. And I actually still do play this quite often. So yeah, let's get right into it. So let's start off with the easy ones. I have 53 into magic, 11 into health, just because I try to stay above 17,000. And let me show you. Let's take off the pet real quick, in case you don't want to use a pet build. I have 16.8k, but there's one thing I use, the new Clockwork Citrus Fillet food. And the reason why I use this one is it's slightly better than the Witch Mother's Potent Brew right here. And it's better by about like 300 health, but it also costs like 10 to 15 times more. So Witch Mother's Brew is still okay to use. I would still use it most of the time and use the Clockwork one for like trials, dungeons, and whatnot. But best in slot is best in slot, and I have it because, well, that's all I go for nowadays. So regardless, if you can, get the gold food. If you can't, Witch Mother's is still very good. And by using the gold food, you'll be above 17,000. Witch Mother's, you'll be slightly under, but you could always add more points into health if needed, so it's not really a big deal. And yeah, so that's how I built mine. If you wanted, you could put 52 and 12 into yours. That's also fine, and then that's good. For our Mundus Stone, we use the Apprentice. I know some people have been using the Lover as well, and the Lover is more just like penetration, so if you're playing solo, that's also good, but in trial and dungeon situations, you kind of want the extra spell damage for maximum DPS, so that's good. And that's pretty much it for this one. So let's go into our gear. So in our gear, we have a lot of stuff that you probably could have had if you watched my videos a few months ago, back from the previous patches. So we have the Alambris 2-piece set. Ideally, you're going to want it in 511. If you want maximum damage, you can go 7 light, but you will be really squishy, so that's kind of how I did it. So my medium is on my helmet, and my heavy is on the chest piece because it gives a little bit of extra armor on the chest piece instead of having it on the shoulder, but realistically, it doesn't matter if you're going to get one-shotted in a trial. Having it on your chest piece versus your shoulder probably won't make a difference. So realistically, it's whatever you have. If you have like heavy and medium on your pieces, it's probably, I mean, just as good. But min-maxing is min-maxing the extra armor on your chest piece. And so yeah, Alambris, 2-piece. We have Julianos is 5-piece. You can craft this in Rothgar somewhere. Let me just show you where it is on the map in case you don't know. It's somewhere around here. I don't have it unlocked on my character or on this character, but I have it on my main, so the crafting station is somewhere within this area, and you'll find it. So Julianos, craftable. It's not that difficult to make. You could also buy it from other people, ask your friends to help you make it, and then you just upgrade it on your own time. And everything we have here is full Magicka enchants and divines pieces. Now, you could technically get away with infused if you're doing pet build, but divines is best in slot, so you should probably go for that one. And now we have the Moon Dancer pieces, and you can get Moon Dancer in Mauve Lorcage. Now, doing it on normal is fairly easy. Doing it on vet and hard mode is a little bit more difficult. So the difference between blue and gold jewelry is very minimal, but min-maxing is min-maxing. So if you can get it gold or purple, use it. But if you can only get it on blue, realistically, the damage difference is very small, and you most likely won't even notice it that much. So we have spell damage on all of them. If you are finding yourself running out of magic or don't know how to do your rotation properly, then you can swap out one spell damage glyph for like a reduced magicka cost or something, reduced skill, whatever. I don't know what it's called, but something that reduces the skill cost by a little bit. But overall, you should be fine, and by this, if you can get it, then you're most likely good enough to do it. So the next weapons we have here, I'll take them off because you probably can't see it. So we have on our front bar, which is our Force Pulse bar, we have our Moon Dancer Inferno Staff. Now here's one thing that I would recommend that's different, is there are a few different choices of races you could play. High Elf, which gives the extra magic and shock damage, or you could play a Dark Elf, which gives the extra fire damage. So a lot of people ask me, is it okay to run double lightning staff or one inferno, one lightning? And the answer is either one is fine. Now, if you are a high elf, then you're going to want to try to use the shock damage enchant. But if you are a dark elf, you want to use the lightning or dark elf, you want to use the fire enchant, and high elf, you want to use lightning. Now, the reasoning is, I'm just going to show you right here under your racial passives. I'm a high elf, and right here you get 4% to your flame, frost, and shock damage. Now, if you were a dark elf, you would get 7% to your flame damage. So that's why I say dark elves get the 3% extra bonus, and I think that one, that's why I used the fire one. Now, in terms of the trait, I used Infused, because Infused just raises your shock damage, and then it calculates the percentage. So pretty much math, and if you don't care about the math and you just want to like copy paste some build, just use Infused. It's currently the best in the slot. So yeah, now on to the question of really Inferno versus Lightning main bar. If you only have a Lightning or you only have an Inferno, it's not really a big deal. Just use whatever you have. You can trait change it nowadays. So, I mean, you're pretty much good to go. Now, I do have both of them, but I use the Inferno because I personally find it a little bit easier to light weave light attacks, or just weaving light attacks in between my rotation with an Inferno. I have used double Lightning before. I've also used double Inferno before, and then right now I'm currently using 1 and 1. So what works for you may be a little bit different for me. So if you find yourself a light weaving perfectly fine with double Lightning, then just go for it. But Inferno, just a little bit easier for me. The most important thing is probably the trait, and second most important thing is probably the enchant. So whether you use Inferno or Lightning, it doesn't matter. Now onto our back bar. I kind of swap out between two of them. I do have two Maelstrom Lightning staves. Now, the one I currently use is the Nirnhone with the weapon damage enchantment. I've actually been testing a few different things. The Asylum staff, which I think is bugged at the moment, where the effect is not properly placed on it, or like if two people are using Asylum weapons and let's say your third cast of it, it'll put a debuff on the enemy. I think that one's bugged, so like only one person gets it. I'm not really 100% sure if that's including the regular or the perfected ones. So right now I don't have a perfected Lightning, and realistically the difference between two casts and the third cast is very minimal. So right now I just use the Maelstrom staff instead, and I use it Nirnhone in group and Sharpen pretty much playing solo. So that's what's going on for me. Now I understand not everyone has Maelstrom staffs. It's not easy to beat. So if you don't have a Maelstrom staff, you could use another Moon Dancer. You can get it in normal Mob Lorcage as well, but getting it to drop is also another thing. Um, if you don't have Moon Dancer or Maelstrom, and you can't get Asylum for some reason, even though it's actually the easiest trial, you can get it on normal as well. Then I would probably just take off one piece here and just like add another Juliano's piece. Realistically, if you don't have these two staves right here, that kind of makes or breaks the build. But if you don't have anything, just use anything, then it makes it easier so you can get any trait you want and any enchant, which is fairly easy. So yeah, recommendations for that. Moon Dancer, Maelstrom. If you don't have a Maelstrom, then you can get like anything else. So like Dragon Star, Master, Asylum, whatever. And yeah, so that's been my gear. You could replace the Alambris with Grothar, but that means you have to play a little bit differently. Alambris is procced by your ranged attack, or like while you're at a range, while Grothar you have to be up close because the Ring of Fire is on you, so you have to be in a close area. So Grothar technically does a little bit more damage, but you have to be close, where Alambris you can be at a range and it'll still proc. Whatever works for you is fine. And Juliano's craftable, it's really easy to get, so you should be able to get that one just fine. And probably some guild traders, people are just selling it if you need it. Alright, so let's go into our skills and then our champion points. Realistically, in terms of skills, nothing has changed. So if you've ever played a Magic Sorcerer, I'll just go over it. But if you have played a Magic Sorcerer, you know exactly what's going on. So yeah. How I ordered mine is just personal preference on how I play, because I usually keep my fingers mostly closer to the 1, 2, and 3. So things I would be using most often were these, and the ones on 4 and 5 are just less often used. So, 1, we have Hardened Ward. It's our shield. We don't really have too much of a self-heal, so our shield is essentially self-heal in a way, more or less. So you kind of want to have one. It really doesn't matter what class you're playing. If you're playing Magic, you probably want a shield. If you're playing Stam, you probably have like Vigor or some other self-heal. So usually just not dying is a good thing. And then next we have our Force Pulse. Force Pulse and the other morph is called Crushing Shock. I actually change between both of these morphs regularly depending on what I'm doing. Force Pulse, I use it like 90% of the time. And then Crushing Shock is if I'm doing a trial that requires a lot of interrupts, like the new Asylum trial, you're going to want to interrupt a lot of it. And pretty much any trial, there's always something to interrupt. So Force Pulse, it does more damage, but no interrupt. Crushing interrupts, but less damage. So it really, if you want more damage, Force Pulse is the way to go. As you may imagine, this is a pet build, so we have the Volatile Familiar, and I've seen some people use the Twilight, not really often, but I do see occasionally some people running double pets, and I actually have no idea how well double pets do, because I don't have it. So, next on our list we have Crystal Frags. We all know how stupid broken this ability is, and it actually got nerfed a little bit, but it's still pretty strong. So, when you do damage, you have a chance to proc it and just chuck out a frag of like crystal, and it does a lot of damage. It's stupid in PvP. It stuns you for a long time, and then PvE things just take a huge chunk of damage. So crystal frags is just a huge like ball of damage that's you don't really hard cast it, but you cast it like when it procs off your other damage. It's just free damage essentially. Now, Inner Light is under our Mages Guild. Pretty much, you have it for the passive ability. When it's slotted, your max magic, your crit is increased. So, overall, your damage is higher. And next, we have our Meteor on our main bar because it does give us extra stuff with our passives connected. You get more magic when it's slotted, so that's why it's on our main bar. And it's pretty good. So, going on to our back bar, we have Blockade of Storms under our Destro. It is the Elemental Blockade. Most of the time people use this because you want the 75 into Thaumaturge. It does extra damage. It also is one of your strongest dots. So, especially if you have a Maelstrom staff, this does a lot of damage without the Maelstrom, and it does even more if you do have a Maelstrom. So next we have Liquid Lightning. This is one of our strongest dots in the game. You just toss it down and things just die. So Liquid Lightning, it's a dot, also an AoE. Daedric Prey versus Haunting Curse. A lot of people have been asking me, and the answer really is, if you are using a pet, you want to use Daedric Prey. If you are not using a pet, you use Haunting Curse. It's really that, in terms of your rotation, it slows it down a little bit if you're using Haunting, because you don't have to recast it, where Daedric Prey, you have to use it once every 6 seconds, and so that's pretty much enough time to recast all your things. So that pretty much answers that question. Mage's Wrath versus the other morph. Mage's Wrath is usually taken more often by people who want to maximize their DPS, because this is an execute, and when enemies are below 20% health, they take significantly more damage, and it stacks higher and higher. So this is your execute. If you want things to die quicker, then that's what you want. The other one, I've seen it gives extra magicka back when things die from this, so really it depends. I've seen people use the other morph in Maelstrom and solo content, and Mage's Wrath in group content. So it really depends on what you're doing. So that decides what morph you should pick. And then, of course, we have the most well-known Destro Ultimate that just annihilates things. So I don't think I really need to explain this much. It's a Destro ult. If you stand in it, you're pretty much gone. And that's about it. So that's been my skills. In terms of what I would change based on what you're doing, if you're solo parsing, I think you could take out the Daedric Prey. This one is your like flex spot, and that means the slot you would replace for other skills. So if you're doing like solo content, you could LE drain instead of this. And if you don't, you could use other stuff you wanted. To be honest, I don't really think there's much, but if you're doing like Veteran Sanctum Ophidia, and we all know what that is, you would want to slot Purge for the hard mode, and you would replace the Daedric Prey as well. So this is the slot you would change if you wanted to do different things, so it just really depends. And now we're going on to the champion points. So before I say anything, I just want to say that this is what works for me. I also change my champion points up a lot because different trials require different CP layouts. And I try to go for score more often than not these days. I've been playing the game since launch, so I try to do the best I possibly can. And yeah, so this is what I currently use, just the overall general CP layout, but things change regularly. So if you have something that works for you, I would highly recommend just staying with what you use instead of what like I'm about to show you, because I do change it. So let's start off with the least relevant and go up to the most relevant. Green Tree, we have 44 in the Warlord, because breaking free from stuns and stuff, whether you're a PvPer or PvEer, is pretty important. 57 into Arcanist, and then 64 into Tenacity. I experimented with this one having between 57 to 100 points, and I realized that adding the additional 43 points into here to get like 3% extra magicka recovery is not really worth it. And the Tenacity at 64, the difference between the extra 36 points is 2% for increased magic and stamina, so you really have to not worry about that one. So I found that this is a perfect balance for me. I also have tested adding 100 points into Arcanist or 100 in here and then different layouts, but really it's up to you. I just don't think the extra 3% for 43 points is worth it, whereas I could put like 37 into Tumbling and 28 into Shadow Ward. Blocking, it's a pretty big thing. So is roll dodging. I do Maelstrom a lot, so I roll dodge things. Sometimes it's a bad habit. So these are kind of changeable. So if you don't want either of these, you could just dump more into Arcanist or Tenacity. But I find that blocking is pretty important, and tumbling is not as high priority, but I do a lot of solo content, as you guys have seen from my gameplay previously, so that's why I have it. So these are kind of very optional. It's not that important. In the green tree, these are the two most important ones. Yeah, so let's go on to red tree. Red tree, let's see. Pretty much all my builds actually nowadays, whether I'm playing a stamina character or Magicka character, use this as a general layout. So 49 hardy, 49 elemental defender, 51 thick skinned, 41 in the spell shield, 40 in the ironclad. Now I actually have been testing something where I took out like 20 points into here and then put it like 20 something into here, so it's like at the next percentage up. And so I had like 60, 20. So right now it's more of a test, and it also depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing veteran trials or you're thinking about getting into veteran trials, I would say you would mostly change these three based on what you're doing. So like for example, if you're doing Sanctum Ophidia, you want more into hardy. And if you're doing like, I don't know, Ethereal Archive and stuff, then you would want more in LA Defender. And if you're doing like Calls of Fabrication, you would want a little bit more in Thick Skinned. So it really depends. If you're at the point where you're getting into trials or just doing them already, you should probably already know the layouts of all your champion points for trials, mostly because you've run it before. So just as a general idea, I'll go over a very quick thing. Sanctum Ophidia has a lot of poison. Ethereal Archive has a lot of magic and lightning damage. Hellra has fire damage. It does have lightning too, but more fire damage. Let's see, what else is there? Asylum. Asylum has poison, lightning, fire. A lot of lightning, actually. That's something you want. And Halls of Fabrication has a lot of physical, bleed damage, lightning. Pretty much has everything, to be honest. And Maw of Lorcage has a lot of magic damage and lightning. So that's just a general idea, so you can balance your points as you see. Alright, so the blue tree, one of the most important ones. 75 in the Thaumaturge to get the Exploiter passive. This is not new. If you watched my videos previously, it's pretty much the same thing as I would use like 4 patches ago. This has not changed. What has changed though is every patch we get 30 new champion points if you are already at the cap. And if you aren't at the cap, don't worry about it. You'll get there eventually just by playing the game. So we have 61 into Elfborn, 56 into Elemental Expert, and 38 into Spell Erosion. I do believe that if you want to use a sharpened weapon, then you don't need as much Spell Erosion, especially if you're in group content. However, previously, as I showed you, I used an infused and Nirnhoned weapon, so that's why I do need a little bit of extra spell penetration. If you are using the Lover Mundus Stone, you also don't need as much here, but I am not using it. So if you only have sharpened weapons, that is also good. Then I would just take out like 25 points into here, or whatever 2,500 worth of spell penetration is, and dump it in between Elfborn and Elemental Expert. So it really is based on the trait of your weapon. So once again, sharpened, you take some points out. No sharpened, you add some points into here. That's basically it. And everything in this tree is more for like stamina characters or stam DPS, melee, and yeah, so this one is more range and whatnot. So next we have, I think we covered everything actually, but yeah, let's go over some potions and replacements. The Necropotence set, or Necropotence, I actually have no idea how to pronounce that. If you are using a pet build, they did nerf it a little bit, but it's still pretty good. Before, the 5-piece set used to give 4,000 Magicka. Now they nerfed it to 3,150. So is it a huge difference? No. Is it a big, is it changed? Yes. So it really depends on what you want to do with it. So I do still have mine. You could use Mother's Sorrow as well if you want a higher crit. And you'd use Julianos and then Mother's Sorrow with jewelry and then 2 pieces of that. You would take off the monster set if you want to use Mother's Sorrow, but either way it works for you, whatever. And then in terms of food, I think we went over this before. The Clockwork Citrus Fillet is best in slot food, but is also significantly more expensive. If you don't have it, then Witch Mother's Potent Brew will help with your Magicka regen and sustain in long fights such as trials and whatnot. And if you're just doing overworld stuff, blue food is just fine as well. Ultimately, you will probably run out of magic if you don't know how to do your rotation properly with blue food, but it's also the cheapest one you can get, and then your damage might be a little bit higher. So, what matters to me personally is your regen, because I like being able to sustain my rotation for a little bit longer than 30 seconds, actually. And the difference between blue food for me is I could go for about like a minute or minute and a half without running low on magic. And with the Witch Mother's Potent Brew or the Clockwork, I can go for like 3 or 4 minutes without running out of magic. And then, of course, I'm using the Spell Power Potions on cooldown, so that does help. Spell Power is like... let me see, what do I need to make it? Hold on, I just have a crafting station. I'll just show you the pieces in person, I guess. So what you're gonna want to do is, I don't make them on this character, but I can make them on my main character. You're gonna use corn flour, and that one's the most important one because corn flour is like the most expensive as well. Next, you're gonna be using the Lady's Smock. This one is also one of the ones that you hardly find anywhere. And then your last piece is the Water Hyacinth, and that makes your Spell Power Potions all together. So realistically, if you don't have your crafting maxed out, just buy it from other people, and it might be a little bit more expensive, but you're not having to sit there and spamming the R button or whatever the thing is just to craft hundreds of them. But yeah, overall, that's been my build. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and if you have, be sure to drop a quick like on the video. If you didn't, give it a dislike and let me know how I can improve in the future. And stay tuned for more upcoming ESO videos in the future where I go over how this build works in actual combat situations, not just me standing there at a target dummy. And I actually don't think target dummies are properly assessed. Like, someone could say, oh, I hit 45k in a target dummy. It's like, but you probably can't do that in a trial because the boss is moving around. You actually have to dodge mechanics and all that stuff. And you also are raid buffed in the trial, whereas in a target dummy, you're just standing still. So that's also something that can be changed variables. But yeah, before I wrap up, I just want to show you, if you want to take a quick screenshot of everything I use, this is an add-on called Superstar. It pretty much just tells you everything. As you guys can see on the right, there's my champion points, all my gear level, the traits of it, and the enchants. And on the left, you see blue, green, red. Blue means I'm using light armor. Green is the medium, and red is heavy. And on the top, you'll see my race and then class. And then all the attribute points I have, how much penetration and all whatnot. And then the top bar in my 5 skills, the one with the Force Pulse, is my Moon Dancer bar, and bar 2 is my Maelstrom bar, and that's pretty much everything in Mundustone. So if you want to just take a quick screenshot, go ahead and do so. And yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know, and I will do my best to answer it as best as possible. So with that said, before I wrap up, I want to say, if you are looking for a guild on the PC North American server, I am currently the leader of one, so if you just send me a message, I'll get you in. Right now, I am in the progress of finding new people to play with, as in a new core, and we just run dungeons and pledges, trials, and whatnot. So yeah, with that said, we have a team Discord, and that means anyone is welcome, regardless of if you play ESO or you don't play ESO and just want to hang out with me and ask me questions. You can do that. But if you want to join, I am on the PC North American server, and yeah, so it's pretty awesome. With that said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.